Hello, welcome to our debrief of Sport for Confidence placement as physiotherapy students. So, introductions and initial perspectives on placement. John, can you kick us off?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm a third year physiotherapy student studying at the University of Essex. This is my final placement before I graduate next month. Before we started this placement, I knew that it'd be a mixture of face-to-face and virtual experiences. We were also aware that we would be the first physio students, as Sport for Confidence is an OT-led service. So we were the first physio students on this placement. And yeah, initially I thought it's very different to anything that I'm used to previously, being outside of a clinical setting and not having a specific timetable. And I knew the advantage of that would be that there would be lots of flexibility with managing my own time and my own caseload. Gab?
Hi, my name is Gabriel Valerio. I am a second year physiotherapy student at the University of Essex. This will be my third placement out of 6. Initially going into this placement, I was tentative and nervous as my last 2 placements were all in a clinical setting. And as John said, this was the first time they were taking on physiotherapy students and physiotherapists in general. So I was a bit unsure on what my role would be and how physiotherapy could be added into Sport for Confidence. So I really kept an open mind because I knew this would be a great learning experience and something that would really shape the way I have my practice.
Hi, I'm Alana. I'm a second year physio student at UE in Bristol. So for me, this placement's been 100% virtual, and it's my first experience of having a virtual placement. I kind of knew what I was getting in for when I signed up in terms of it all being online, but I wasn't sure what we were going to be doing or what's expected of us. So yeah, I think it's been a bit of a learning curve for all of us with a completely new experience. But I was really keen to find out how Sport for Confidence worked and how they made sport inclusive for all. So just as an overview of the placement, so obviously for me being fully virtual, I kind of watched some of the online classes, so the dance class and the fun fitness class, and I basically just kind of made some notes and was feeding back to one of the OTs, Rosanna. And then, yeah, I was just having all of my experience online. So we put together like a climbing guide between the 3 of us, and we reached out to lots of different people in the climbing world, tried to get some case studies together and just learn a little bit more about adaptive climbing.
Yeah, so for Gab and I, the placement was a bit different because being based in Essex, we were able to visit some of the local leisure centres. So we managed to meet some different members of staff, including OTs, sports coaches, and some of the coaching assistants who were also participants at the leisure centres. And we got to see the merging role of physiotherapy in that environment because we had some good chats with some of the participants and members of staff. And they gave us their perspectives on how they thought physios could fit in. And we also got to see things that we could do, such as one-on-one gym sessions and kind of giving people individualized exercise programs if they wanted to build up to being able to do a particular activity.
And yeah, just to add to some of the points that John has said, it's been really great visiting the leisure centres and meeting all the participants and their carers. And it's really allowed me and John to have the flexibility in a different environment and trying to make sure we can modify certain activities for participants so that they can get the most out of the activities and sessions. I think it's been a real eye-opener on how physiotherapy can be implemented in Sport for Confidence and how physiotherapy practice does not need to be isolated within a clinical environment. So yeah, this placement's been really great in terms of having the ability to reflect on the experiences we've had, the people we've met to create these case studies, and also just being able to work with other students like John and Alana and have that cooperation between different universities.
So between the three of us, we put together some information to go towards the climbing guide. So yeah, as I said in the previous slide, we reached out to people from the climbing community, just to kind of get their understanding on climbing and how they got into it and what climbing means to them. And then between us, we put together some information. So I put together a bit of stuff about the equipment, and what sort of specialized things you might need for adaptive climbing. And then, yeah, the activity analysis, just kind of like motor skills and things that might be required with climbing.
Yeah, and I, as my part of the guide, I focused on the physical demands and benefits of climbing. So think about which muscles and muscle groups are used the most in climbing, and some kind of warm up and practice exercises that people can try, which would allow them to do climbing, whether adapted or free. And also looked at the evidence behind the benefits of climbing, so specifically relating to physical health.
And my role within the climbing guide was to look at the psychological and social benefits of climbing. So looking at the research that currently is available and where there is a gap in the research at the moment, and all the stuff that we've looked into as a collective has added into an activity analysis, which breaks down certain components that the climbing can provide an individual when taking part.
So kind of the emerging role of physiotherapy in sport for confidence and what this might mean for the future. So I think physiotherapy would enhance the service at Sport for Confidence. So from an online perspective, just based on what I saw, I don't think that physiotherapy would make a huge difference to things like the dance classes, just because that's kind of like a fun activity to do and it doesn't need to be kind of broken down into anything more specific. But in terms of online classes, where I think physiotherapy might be more beneficial would be if there was like a strength and balance class, or anything which is, you know, it could still be fun, but just a little bit more specific, if you start thinking about things like falls prevention. And also with the initial onboarding process, I think having a physio would help to distribute some of the workload and maybe free up some of the OTs to do more of the sports classes and other things. And the physio could come in and assess, you know, mobility, strength, balance, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and another thing that we have spoken to people about, specifically staff, is that physios could be useful for risk assessing participants. So if somebody comes into a session, they've got, I don't know, pain in their foot, for example, or they're saying they can't move their arm, then a physio could perhaps assess them just to rule out anything serious, and to make an onward referral if that's needed, and also just to give people individual exercises if they have noticed a particular physical impairment, for example, which that's the area that physio would specialise in. So there's perhaps a role for physios there as well.
And yeah, as we've been able to meet some of the participants, it's been great. We've been building that relationship with them, and they've been a little bit more comfortable as the weeks have gone on to approach us if they've got any concerns or any needs, or any just reassurance really towards their own health and well-being. And as we've realized that a lot of the participants would feel that physiotherapy would be a great added role into Sport for Confidence, because just the reassurance that there's another health professional there who's a little bit more specialized towards the whole physical health, and this would play a massive role in having that multidisciplinary team between the OTs and sport coaches, and discussing how we could improve the overall life of the participant in all aspects that we could cover.
Yeah, one other thing as well, in one of the leisure centres in Basildon, there is a musculoskeletal physio clinic at the same place, and some of the participants see physio there, but they also go to some of the sport for confidence sessions, and they were saying if the exercise are kind of linked up, so the outpatient exercise they're given are specific towards some of the activities that they like to do, for example netball, then they feel that really benefit them. So I think having a physio part of the team would improve those connections as well with the outpatient service.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's like the sports coaches, OTs, and physios. Like as you can see from the diagram there, it all kind of overlaps in some way or another. But then you've also each discipline's got their own kind of stuff that they can work on. So yeah, I think it would be great going forwards to have everybody on board because there's a lot of overlap with the roles, but then there's also separate things that you can concentrate on. And I think kind of in the future that will just help sport of confidence expand and grow and just give them, you know, the service to just be able to offer so much more.
Yeah.
And I would lastly like to highlight, we have discussed with other members of staff that we, as physios, we're not trying to make our service as almost an MSK outpatient service, and we need to make sure that there's the fine line between our practice and what the NHS provides, and making sure that we are not taken away from the ethos and current standards that Sport for Confidence has in ensuring the inclusivity and accessibility that they provide to their service users.
Yeah.
So overall feedback and reflections. So for me, obviously this is my first fully virtual placement, and I think because it's the first time that Sport for Confidence has had physio students on board, I think they were a bit unsure about how it's going to work, and I also had absolutely no idea about what was going to happen and what we were going to do. So it was maybe a little bit unstructured in terms of just kind of figuring things out as we go. And I wouldn't say that's really a bad thing, because it's meant that I've had to take responsibility and control for finding myself things to do. So that's actually probably been a good learning experience for me, just to use my initiative, take responsibility. But I think in terms of going forwards in the future, it would be good for other students to maybe have a little bit more structure, just so there's, you know, something planned, something to look forward to, and something to prepare for, rather than kind of trying to find something on the day to do. And you know, yeah, I think a bit of structure, but overall it's been a really good experience for me. I've enjoyed having this opportunity, and I think that there's actually a unique opportunity that Sport for Confidence offers, because on a regular physiotherapy placement where you're based in a clinical setting, you go through all of your clinical skills, all your practical skills, you know, how to write notes and all that sort of stuff. But when you get out into the working world, at some point you're probably going to be thrown into some sort of management, and I think Sport for Confidence gives you the opportunity to practice managing your own diary, managing your own time, and also it's an opportunity to learn about what happens behind the scenes. So how something can go from just being an idea on a piece of paper to up into, you know, a big organization like Sport for Confidence, and how you can get community funding, and kind of just how everything works. And I think that's something really important to know for once you graduate, because you don't get that opportunity anywhere else.
Yeah, really good points actually. I agree with everything Ilana said. I think also like having a kind of hybrid, partly virtual and partly face-to-face placement, at times it did feel like it was two separate placements, because we had the times at the leisure centres where we're seeing people face-to-face and kind of doing a little bit of assessment and treatment, and then we had the online side of things where we're doing the climbing project. I can at the end of the placement see the links between the two different sections, because we were putting together some information to help us develop the climbing guide for people with different needs. But I think in a way, if he's had the chance to speak to different members of staff to get their experiences early on, who'd been with Sport for Confidence from the beginning, it might have given us just a bit more of an idea as to the whole kind of perspective and ethos behind the company, and I think that would have been really helpful. So yeah, definitely say for the next physio students, like having a chat with one of the founders would be really good. But I think on the positive side, it has given us a lot of opportunities to work with different people and think about adapting our communication styles, and think about goal setting and, you know, giving people confidence for life instead of just giving them a sheet of exercises. So I think that whole kind of social and communication aspect has been really good.
In terms of my feedback, I think going into this placement, keep an open mindset towards all the experiences and opportunities that Sport for Confidence can provide. Going into this, I've developed my practice for sure, understanding that there needs to be more emphasis on the importance of a patient in terms of understanding that they are a person first and then everything else follows. So definitely that's a key point that I've learned. And I've also reflected upon both my professional and personal ability, which is definitely going to be pushed forward into the future. And agreeing with both Alana and John, a little bit more structure would be great, because then we would know what things we need to do per week. But at the same time, it's been great having to work through weeks without a structure, because then we've had to work on our time management and workload skills. And yeah, and having the opportunity to work with someone from a different uni, it's been great. Finding other perspectives, how other universities work. And we even got the opportunity to work with a dietitian this year, which was also a really good opportunity as well.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, being able to work with students from different universities. Obviously, we've had, John, Gab and I have all had very different experiences, because mine has been purely online, and they, as they said, they've had the opportunity to go to the leisure centre and actually meet participants. But I think the three of us working together and being from different universities is it's been really good. I think we've worked really well together, and like we've not, you know, there's not really any strong opinions. Nobody's kind of like kicking off about little things or anything like that. Like we've all just managed somehow just to come together and work really well, which I think is also a really great opportunity and experience. But then maybe also to consider in the future that not all students are going to be like us, and that's not to say that we're like perfect little angels, but you know, you might have some students in future who are not as self-motivated, or you might have students who just don't really care about the placement. And so I think that might be something to consider going forwards. Yeah, and like if you like, for me, it would have been interesting to be on the placement with other students from UA, because then at least we'd probably all be local, and even if we were all virtual, we could still meet up and kind of go through things together. But yeah, I still feel like John, Gab and I have had a really great experience, and I think that we've done some really good work. So hopefully for the future students, they'll have the same attitudes that we've had, and they'll just be able to get on with it. But yeah, it might be something to consider, what might happen in the future.
Yeah, I think the fact is it's not a typical physio placement, because in a standard physio placement you'd be assessing people, writing notes, giving people a treatment plan. It's not really like that with this one. It has been very different to any other placement we've had, and possibly could take some students by surprise. But I do think overall it has been a positive experience. And I think I've definitely learned, like in future practice, for kind of you know, organizational skills and think about teamwork and doing projects together. I think for me personally, I just make sure that I kind of meet with my supervisor or the person leading the project regularly, just so everybody knows what they're doing early on. That's just something I'll take on board for the future. But I think overall it has been a positive experience.
And I would like to add that maybe the introduction of these kinds of placements need to be incorporated within the university modules, just so that there's the early exposure of these kinds of placements and the emerging role of physiotherapists in different settings. For myself as a student coming straight from sixth form, being the youngest from my cohort, and having no clinical practice at all, this has been something that's shocked me in a way, but it's been a real good learning experience. But as Alana said, not all students will be reciprocating the same attitudes that we've demonstrated throughout the placement. And we're no angels, of course, but just the idea that this will be very daunting for a lot of students, and maybe the introduction of this early on would be great.
Anything else to add, guys?
No, just I think you know, thank you to Liz and all the OTs and coaches and everybody else who's you know, talked to us and given us their time and made us feel welcome. We definitely felt welcome from day one, and yeah, just want to thank everyone really for taking us on board.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, everyone. And to future students, just keep an open mind and communicate, and you'll have a great time.
Yep, same.
Cool.